She leaned in so close I could feel her breath against the side of my face, like she was about to tell me something private, something harmless. Instead, she dropped a threat so sharp it made my stomach clench. I remember the smell of her vanilla hand lotion, the gritty asphalt under my shoes, and the way my daughter's little sneakers scuffed the curb while she hummed to herself, completely unaware that her parents were turning her life into a bargaining chip. I'm telling this the way it happened, but I'm changing names and small identifying details because my kids deserve a childhood that isn't searchable. I was married for 10 years. 2 kids. A house that always had fingerprints on the sliding glass door. A fridge covered in school artwork, held up by cheap magnets from the dentist office. I worked in operations for a plumbing supply company in the north end of town, the kind of job where my hands always smelled faintly like cardboard and metal shelving. I wasn't perfect. I got tired. I got distracted. I sometimes forgot to grab milk on the way home and had to do the late-night corner store run like a rookie. But I was present. I coached soccer on Saturdays. I did bath time. I knew which stuffed animal had to be on which side of the pillow, or my daughter wouldn't sleep. My ex-wife, Rachel, could be incredible when she wanted to be. Organized, magnetic, the kind of person who could make a neighbor feel like a best friend in 5 minutes. When we were good, we were a team. When we weren't, she fought like winning was oxygen. The divorce didn't start with one explosion. It started like a leak under a sink. A drip. A stain. The slow, quiet rot that makes you think it's not that bad until the cabinet floor caves in. The red flags were there, looking back. Rachel started keeping score in a way that didn't feel like partnership anymore. If I took the kids to a birthday party, it didn't count because she'd bought the gift. If I made dinner, it didn't count because she'd planned the week's groceries. She began speaking about the kids like they were her property. My babies, she'd say, and there was something in her tone that didn't include me. Then the language changed. She started calling me a part-time dad during arguments, even though I was in the same house, folding the same tiny socks. If I tried to talk about counseling, she'd smirk and say I was performing. If I asked for a compromise, she'd say, "That's not how this works." Like she was the judge and I was already guilty. When she filed, it was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my late day at work, and I came home to a thick envelope on the kitchen counter next to a bowl of clementines. The papers looked sterile and official, like they belonged to someone else's life. She didn't cry. She didn't even look sorry. She just said, "I'm done." The first custody conversation felt like stepping onto ice I didn't know was thin. Rachel wanted me to sign an agreement that would have made me a visitor in my kids' lives, weekends every other week. A few hours on Wednesdays, if it worked with her schedule. The kind of language that made it sound reasonable until I read it slowly and realized my relationship with my kids would be permanently subject to her mood. I said no. Not angrily, not dramatically, just no. And that's when the tension changed. Not louder, exactly. Sharper. The first few exchanges after we separated were technically peaceful, if someone only watched from a distance. We met in a neutral place because that's what our temporary orders suggested while everything was pending. A big grocery store parking lot near a Starbucks, bright enough at night to feel like daylight. Cameras everywhere. Families walking in and out with carts. It was the kind of public space where people assume nothing truly ugly will happen. That's what Rachel counted on. The day it happened was Thursday, February 8th. It was 6:17 p.m. I know the time because I glanced at my phone when I parked and saw the lock screen. A photo of my kids wearing mismatched Halloween costumes. My son grinning with a fake mustache. Rachel arrived in her SUV 2 minutes later, the one with the cracked corner on the rear bumper from when she clipped the garage months before we split. The kids were in the back. My daughter had her unicorn water bottle. My son had a backpack with an astronaut patch he insisted made him look official. I walked up with the calm smile I'd been practicing in the mirror like a man rehearsing for a job interview. "Hey, buddy," I said to my son, trying to keep my voice light. "You ready for pizza night?" He hesitated like he'd forgotten the script. Then he nodded. My daughter bounced, already halfway out of the car seat, holding her water bottle like a microphone. "I'm hungry," she announced. Rachel leaned across the center console and handed me a folded packet of papers. The edges were slightly bent, like she'd been gripping them too hard. Her nails were freshly done, pale pink, and she tapped the paper once against my chest, a little punctuating gesture. "Read it tonight," she said. "Sign it, bring it back." I didn't take it immediately. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, because I already knew what it was. "I'll have my attorney review anything before I sign," I said. "That's what we agreed." Rachel's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We agreed," she echoed, like the words tasted bad. My kids were distracted by something across the lot. Maybe a man juggling grocery bags, or maybe just a bird hopping near the curb. My daughter pointed. "Look." Rachel took one step closer, blocking the kids' view of my face. The parking lot noise faded into a blurry hum, and then she did it. She turned her head like she was about to say goodbye, and instead she whispered right into my ear, "Sign the papers or I'll turn the kids against you." For half a second, my body reacted before my brain did. Heat up my neck, a pounding behind my eyes, that instinctive urge to snap back, to say something devastating, to force her to understand she couldn't do that. Then my daughter laughed at something, and the sound yanked me back to the truth. My kids were right there. My kids were always right there, and Rachel was counting on me to lose control in front of them, so she could point at my anger and call it proof. I swallowed. I kept my expression neutral. I made myself breathe in through my nose, slow enough that it didn't look like I was trying not to explode. That wasn't a co-parenting conversation. That was blackmail using my kids as a weapon. I looked at her, and I did something that, at the time, felt almost pathetic, because it wasn't satisfying. I didn't threaten her back. I didn't match her energy. I said quietly, "Okay, just okay." Rachel blinked like she expected fireworks and got fog instead. My son slid out of the car and stepped toward me, and I forced my face into something warm. "Hey, champ," I said again, and I ruffled his hair the way I always did. I could feel Rachel staring at me like she was trying to read my next move. My daughter climbed down and immediately announced, "I have a loose tooth," and she opened her mouth so wide I could see the little gap starting. I smiled, genuinely this time. "That's huge," I said. "Tooth Fairy's going to need a bigger wallet." And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, I reached for her hand, and my fingers brushed something sticky. I looked down and saw a half-melted gummy bear glued to her sleeve. I made a face without thinking. "Ma'am," I said to my daughter in my best serious voice, "are you smuggling candy?" She giggled and tried to hide her sleeve behind her back like she'd been caught in an international crime. Rachel let out the tiniest laugh, the kind that could have been human if it wasn't sitting on top of what she'd just said to me. It was an awkward little moment, and then the air snapped tight again. I walked the kids to my car. My son climbed in, buckling himself with the exaggerated competence of an 8-year-old who wanted credit for basic life skills. My daughter climbed in and immediately dropped her unicorn bottle, and it rolled under the passenger seat. "Dad, it escaped," she said, like it had legs. "I'll catch it," I told her, crouching and reaching under the seat, my fingers bumping against old French fries and a small plastic dinosaur I thought we'd lost in December. When I pulled the bottle out, I held up the dinosaur too. My son groaned. "Dad, not the dinosaur." My daughter gasped like I'd found treasure. "Sir Sparkles." The name was ridiculous. It was perfect. For a moment, I felt like myself again. Then I looked up and saw Rachel still standing there by her SUV, watching, and I remembered the whisper in my ear. I remembered the chill underneath the heat. I drove away with my kids singing along to a song on the radio, and I kept my voice steady when I answered their questions about dinner, school, and why my son's pencil case smelled like cheese. I laughed at the right moments. I didn't let them see my hands gripping the steering wheel too hard. When I dropped them off 2 days later, I sat in my car for a full minute after they went inside Rachel's place. My phone was in my lap. The screen was smudged from my thumb. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the windshield, the overhead streetlight making my face look older than it was. That was the moment I made the decision that carried me through the next months. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I did something smarter. I saved every message so the court could hear the truth. It started small, like collecting pebbles before realizing I was building a wall. Rachel began texting more than she used to. Short, sharp messages designed to make me react. At first, I tried to respond like a normal co-parent. Clear, polite, focused on the kids. But it became obvious fast that she didn't want clarity. She wanted a fight. She wanted a screenshot of me losing it. So I changed how I communicated. I kept it boring. I kept it factual. I kept it calm. 2 weeks after the parking lot whisper, on a Sunday night, my phone buzzed at 9:41 p.m. The kids were asleep in their beds at my apartment. I had a cheap lamp on the side table, the kind with a beige shade that makes everything look like late autumn. I was folding laundry, and my son's socks kept coming out inside out like they were protesting. The message popped up on my screen. Their message said, "Sign or I'll make them hate you." I stared at it so long my screen dimmed and went dark. I tapped it awake again just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I took a screenshot. I emailed it to myself. I created a folder in my email titled Custody, like I was filing taxes. I didn't respond. Not that night. The next day, Monday, February 26th, at 7:08 a.m., while I was packing lunches, peanut butter sandwich for my son, cut strawberries for my daughter, another message came. Their message said, "I'll tell them. You abandoned them." My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. My daughter walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, and immediately asked, "Can I have cereal and a strawberry and also a cookie?" "Nice try," I said automatically, and she pouted like I'd ruined her entire life. I kissed the top of her head and told her the strawberries were already in her lunch. Then I stepped into the hallway, out of their view, and I took another screenshot. I kept a log after that. Not a dramatic diary. A simple record on a yellow legal pad I bought at the office supply store for $3.49. Date. Time. What happened. Whether the kids were involved. Whether Rachel denied visitation. Whether she made a threat. I wrote in black pen because it looked clean and serious, and I underlined the dates like I was trying to convince myself the structure would hold me together. Rachel started playing games with exchanges. She'd forget the time. She'd show up 20 minutes late and then act like I was unreasonable for mentioning it. One Friday, I waited in the same grocery store parking lot with my kid's overnight bag blue with a broken zipper and a little plastic bag of my daughter's allergy medicine. 6 p.m. came and went. At 6:23, I called Rachel. It went to voicemail. At 6:31, I got a text. Running behind. At 7:02, she finally pulled in. She didn't apologize. She rolled down her window and said, "They're tired. Don't make this hard." I felt my jaw tighten. My son sat in the back seat of my car watching. My daughter held Sir Sparkles, the dinosaur, like a comfort object. "Rachel," I said, keeping my voice low. "We agreed on 6. She shrugged. "Life happens." I wanted to say 100 things. Instead, I said, "Okay. I'm documenting the exchange time." Her eyes flashed. "Document whatever you want." She snapped. And then she leaned forward, addressing the kids in that overly sweet voice adults use when they're trying to make a point. "Say goodbye to Daddy." My daughter waved. My son didn't. That was new. At my place that weekend, my son kept asking, "When am I going back?" Not in an excited way, in a tense way, like he was worried about being late to something important. On Saturday night, I asked him gently, "Hey, what's going on?" He shrugged, staring at his plate. I'd made spaghetti. It was a little too salty because I overcompensated after tasting the sauce and thinking it was bland. My daughter didn't care. She covered hers in Parmesan like she was salting a driveway. My son poked at his noodles and said, "Mom said you don't like us anymore." The words hit like a slap. Not because I was shocked Rachel would say it, but because hearing it come out of my son's mouth made it real, in a way texts never could. I forced myself to breathe before I answered. I kept my voice soft. "I love you more than anything," I said. "Nothing changes that." He looked up, suspicious, like he'd been trained to doubt me. "Then why don't you live with us?" I felt my throat tighten. I didn't blame Rachel. I didn't call her a liar. I didn't unload my pain onto an 8-year-old. "Sometimes adults can't live in the same house," I said, "but I'm still your dad. Always." He watched my face like he was searching for cracks. My daughter suddenly interrupted, mouth full of spaghetti. "Dad lives here now. It's smaller." but it has better snacks. My son snorted despite himself. I pointed my fork at her. Better snacks because somebody keeps asking for cookies with breakfast. She grinned, unapologetic. And then there it was, that tiny normal moment. That little patch of ground that still felt safe. I held onto it like it was a rope, but the changes kept coming. My kids' greetings got colder when I picked them up. My son stopped running to me. My daughter started asking strange questions. One Tuesday night, I called them to say goodnight when they were at Rachel's place. Rachel answered and put it on speaker. I could hear a TV in the background and the clink of dishes. "Hi," I said, forcing brightness. "I just wanted to tell you I love you and I'll see you Friday." My daughter's voice came small. "Mom says you only call because you have to." I closed my eyes. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. "No," I said gently. "I call because I want to hear your voice." There was a pause. Not a normal pause. A coached pause. Like someone was waiting for her to say the next line. My son's voice came in flat. "Mom says you're trying to take us away." The hardest part wasn't the court papers. It was hearing my child repeat words I knew didn't start in their heart. I kept my voice steady. "Nobody is taking anybody away," I said. "Both Mom and Dad love you, and both Mom and Dad should be in your life." Rachel's voice cut in, sharp and cheerful at the same time. "Okay, that's enough. They have homework." "Can I talk to them for one more minute?" I asked. "No," she said. "Good night." The line went dead. I stared at my phone until my screen dimmed again, and then I opened my email folder and added a note to the log. Date, time. Denied call. It felt ridiculous, like I was collecting tiny scraps of sadness, but I kept going. Rachel's threats escalated in the messages. Sometimes she was direct, sometimes she was sneaky, the kind of language designed to look innocent until the pattern formed. One message. "If you cared, you'd just sign." Another. "Stop confusing them." Another. "They're happier without the back and forth." And then the one that made my skin crawl because it was so confident, so sure she could perform her way into winning. Their message said, "In court, I'll cry and you'll lose." I screenshot it. I saved it. I didn't respond. I started routing communication through email as much as possible. If Rachel texted, I replied with, "Please send scheduling details via email," and I kept it neutral, like a robot. I hated how cold it felt. I hated that I had to treat my kids' lives like a business negotiation. But warmth was a weapon in Rachel's hands. She could twist it into weakness. I also started saving voicemails. Rachel left a lot of them when she was angry because she thought a phone call couldn't be preserved the way a text could. She didn't realize my phone saved them automatically, time-stamped, like little audio landmines. One voicemail came at 10:13 p.m. on a Wednesday. Her voice was low and furious. "You think you're so smart," she hissed. "You think the judge is going to believe you? I'm their mother. They'll do what I say. So sign the papers and stop wasting my time." I exported the voicemail and saved it to a folder on my laptop. I backed it up on a flash drive I kept in my desk drawer next to a stapler and a pack of gum that had gone stale. I wasn't building drama. I was building a timeline. The first lawyer I spoke to felt like a salesman. He talked fast, quoted scary prices, and kept saying things like, "You don't want to make her mad." I left his office feeling smaller than when I walked in. The second lawyer, Miss Patel, was different. Her office smelled like coffee and printer toner. She had a stack of folders on her desk and a tiny cactus in a ceramic pot that looked like it had survived out of pure spite. I sat across from her with my backpack full of printed screenshots and my yellow legal pad, my handwriting cramped from trying to fit everything in. She looked at me and said, "Tell me the truth, even if it makes you look imperfect." So I did. I told her about the parking lot. I told her about the threats. I told her about my son repeating things that didn't sound like him. I told her about the nights I sat in my car after drop-offs, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how a man could feel so powerless while still being responsible. Miss Patel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she turned my legal pad toward her and read the dates. "Good," she said quietly. "Good?" I repeated, stunned. "Not what's happening," she said. "Your documentation. This is what courts understand. Patterns, facts, Verifiable events. I swallowed. She's telling everyone I'm unstable, I admitted. That I'm angry. That I'm dangerous. Miss Patel's eyes stayed calm. Then we don't give her unstable, she said. We don't give her angry. We give her consistent. I slid my phone across the desk and played one voicemail. Rachel's voice filled the small room like a toxin. Miss Patel paused at midway and looked at me. Do you have more? I nodded and pulled out my flash drive. How many messages? She asked. I stopped counting at 100, I said. But I have screenshots. I have dates. I have everything organized. She leaned back, and for the first time since the divorce started, I felt something that wasn't panic. I felt momentum. Here's what we do, Miss Patel said. We ask for temporary orders that protect your parenting time. We ask the court to require all communication through a parenting app. We request that neither parent speaks negatively about the other in front of the kids, with consequences. And we ask for counseling, because the kids are already showing signs of stress. I nodded, my throat tight. Will it matter? I asked. She's good at acting. Miss Patel's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Acting doesn't beat evidence, she said. And if she really thinks she can cry her way through, let her try. We'll bring receipts. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a knot of guilt in my stomach about the money. The retainer was $5,000. It felt obscene, like buying the right to be my kid's dad. I paid it anyway, because the alternative was letting Rachel rewrite reality. Over the next month, I lived in two worlds. In one world, I was making pancakes shaped like hearts because my daughter said circles were boring. In the other world, I was labeling email threads and printing messages at work when no one was looking, feeding paper into the office printer like I was preparing for war. Rachel didn't stop. If anything, she got bolder. She started forgetting school events when it was my week to attend. I'd find out after the fact that my son had a class presentation, and there would be photos on Rachel's social media of her smiling in the front row, like she was the only parent who existed. When I confronted her politely by email, she replied, "You didn't ask." I did ask. I had the email. I printed that too. One of the most painful moments happened on a Saturday morning in March. I pulled up to Rachel's place for a scheduled pickup. The kids were supposed to come with me for my weekend. I rang the bell. I waited. I could hear muffled movement inside. Then the door cracked open, just enough for Rachel's face to appear. "They don't want to go," she said. I kept my voice calm. "This is my weekend," I said. "I'm here." Rachel opened the door wider, and my son stood behind her, eyes down. My daughter clutched her unicorn bottle, looking confused. "Tell him," Rachel said to my son. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were hard. My son didn't move. An awkward silence spread between us like spilled oil. I could hear a neighbor's dog barking down the street. I could hear my own breathing. I crouched slightly, lowering myself to my son's level. "Hey," I said gently. "What's going on?" My son's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom said you're going to take us and not bring us back." My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I looked at Rachel. She shrugged, like she had no idea where he got that. I forced my eyes back to my son. "That's not true," I said. "I always bring you back. I always do." My daughter suddenly blurted, "Dad always gives back," and then she giggled at her own words because she thought she'd made a joke. My son's mouth twitched despite himself. Rachel's face tightened. "Stop manipulating them," she snapped. I stood slowly. "I'm not manipulating anyone," I said. "I'm asking to follow the court schedule." Rachel crossed her arms. "If you make a scene, I'll call the police," she said. I felt my pulse in my throat. I pictured the kids watching cops talk to their parents on the front lawn. I pictured Rachel using that as another story about my instability. So I didn't argue in the doorway. I didn't raise my voice. I stepped back. "Okay," I said. "I'm documenting that you denied my parenting time." Rachel smiled, thin and victorious, and closed the door. I walked back to my car with my hands shaking. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. I opened my log and wrote the date and time. I saved the email I sent afterward confirming what happened. I refused to let the moment disappear into he said, she said. That night, I stood in my kitchen alone and made too much spaghetti out of habit. I stared at the extra plates, like they were evidence of everything Rachel was trying to steal. When the court date finally came, it didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt bureaucratic. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, people in cheap suits holding manila envelopes. The air smelled like old carpet and anxiety. The hearing was on Monday, April 22nd. I arrived at 8:11 a.m. because I couldn't stand the idea of being late for something this important. I sat on a hard bench with my binder on my lap. The binder was thick, tabbed with colored dividers. It looked like a school project, except the subject was my children. I tried to dress like a person who had his life together. Navy slacks, white shirt, simple tie. As I sat there, I realized with sudden horror that I still had a tiny price sticker on the bottom edge of my tie, like a flag announcing I was new to pretending I belonged in court. I leaned forward and tried to peel it off quietly. It made that faint, ripping sound stickers make when they don't want to let go. A woman sitting across from me glanced up. I froze, mid-peel, like I'd been caught doing something illegal. I managed to get it off and stuffed it into my pocket, my face hot with embarrassment. It was such a stupid moment, and it was also the only moment that day that felt remotely funny. Then Rachel walked in. She looked polished, hair perfect, outfit carefully chosen to look soft and innocent. She carried herself like she'd already won, like the courtroom was just a formality. Her lawyer was with her, a man in a gray suit who shook hands like he was closing deals. Rachel didn't look at me at first. Then her eyes flicked toward my binder, and for just a second I saw something like uncertainty. The bailiff called our case, and suddenly my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. We stood. We were sworn in. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waste time, looked down at both of us like she'd seen every version of this story 1,000 times and didn't care about performances. Rachel's lawyer started. He painted a picture of Rachel as the stable primary parent and me as unreliable. He used phrases like inconsistency and emotional volatility. Rachel sniffed at the right moments, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like she was auditioning for sympathy. When it was Rachel's turn to speak, she stepped forward, hands clasped, voice trembling. "I'm just trying to protect them," she said. "They need routine, they need stability, and he makes everything stressful." The judge watched her carefully. "How does he make it stressful?" the judge asked. Rachel inhaled like she was about to share something tragic. "He argues," she said. "He refuses to cooperate. He shows up and demands things. The kids get upset." I felt my jaw tighten. I looked down at the table and kept my hands flat, palms against the wood, like I was anchoring myself. Rachel continued. "Sometimes he doesn't even call, and when he does, he talks badly about me. He confuses them." My stomach churned because it was a lie, and it was a lie designed to trigger me. If I snapped, she could point and say, "See?" The judge turned her gaze to me. "Sir," she said, "what is your response?" I opened my mouth and felt a rush of words press forward. Rage, pain, months of swallowed fear. Then I saw my lawyer's hand move slightly, a subtle reminder. Facts, not feelings. I spoke slowly. "I want joint custody," I said. "I want a consistent schedule. I want both of us to stop using the kids as messengers. I've asked for that repeatedly." Rachel's lawyer scoffed softly, like I was being unreasonable. The judge turned to Miss Patel. "Counsel?" she asked. Miss Patel stood and adjusted her glasses, calm as a person ordering lunch. "Your Honor," she said, "we have documentation." Rachel's head snapped toward her. Miss Patel continued. "We have text messages, emails, and voicemails that demonstrate a pattern of threats and interference with parenting time." Rachel's lawyer raised a hand. "Objection, Your Honor. This is—" The judge held up a finger. "I'll decide what it is," she said. Then she looked at Miss Patel. "Proceed." Miss Patel handed a packet to the clerk, who handed it to the judge. The judge flipped through the pages. Her eyes moved quickly, like she was scanning for the spine of the story. The room felt too quiet. I could hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights. I could hear someone's pen scratching in the back. The judge stopped on one page and looked up. "This message," she said, and she read it aloud in a tone so flat it was terrifying. "States, sign, or I'll make them hate you." Rachel's face twitched. The judge flipped another page. And this one says, "I'll tell them you abandoned them." Rachel's lawyer shifted his weight, suddenly less confident. Miss Patel's voice stayed steady. "Your Honor, there are more," she said. "There is also a voicemail we would like to submit." Rachel's lawyer snapped. "Your Honor, we object to audio." The judge cut him off. "Counsel," she said, eyes sharp. "Stop interrupting." He shut his mouth. Miss Patel held up a small flash drive. The clerk took it. The judge nodded. When the audio played, Rachel's voice filled the courtroom. Not the soft, trembling voice she'd used a few minutes earlier. The real voice. The angry voice. The voice that assumed power. "You think the judge is going to believe you?" the recording said. "I'm their mother. They'll do what I say." Rachel went pale. Her hand tightened around the tissue until it crumpled. The courtroom went so still it felt like time stopped. That was the awkward silence. The kind that doesn't just hang in the air, it presses down on everyone in the room, forcing them to feel the weight of the truth. Rachel's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but I couldn't hear the words. Rachel stared straight ahead, blinking fast. The judge clicked off the audio and looked directly at Rachel. "Do you deny that is your voice?" she asked. Rachel swallowed. It was taken out of context," she said quickly. "He provoked me." The judge's expression didn't change. "Out of context," she repeated, and her tone made it clear she didn't believe in magic contexts where threats become reasonable. Rachel tried again, desperation rising. "He pushes me," she said. "He acts calm, but he's not. He's trying to make me look bad." Miss Patel didn't flinch. "Your Honor," she said, "we also have documentation of denied parenting time and denied phone calls, logged with dates and follow-up emails." The judge turned back to the paperwork, flipping through my log excerpts. "I see a pattern," she said finally. Her voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it now. "I see repeated interference. I see threats that specifically reference alienating the children from their father." Rachel's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client is simply concerned." The judge cut him off again. "No," she said. "Your client is attempting to control the children's relationship with their father. That is not concern. That is manipulation." Rachel's eyes widened, and for the first time since the divorce started, she looked like she couldn't charm her way out. She thought she could control the story. She didn't realize the story was saved. Word for word. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Here is what this court is going to do," she said. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The judge laid out the new temporary orders. My parenting time would be protected with a clear, structured schedule that didn't depend on Rachel's mood. Exchanges would happen at specified times. If either parent was late, it would be documented and could be addressed. Communication would go through a court-approved parenting app, or written messages only. No more phone calls used as ambushes. Both parents would be prohibited from speaking negatively about the other parent in front of the children. The kids would be enrolled in counseling with a neutral, licensed therapist to help them process the stress. Then the judge looked at Rachel again, her voice sharper. "If there is further interference with parenting time," she said, "there will be consequences. Do you understand?" Rachel's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue but couldn't find a safe angle. "Yes," she said finally, voice small. The judge's gaze shifted to me. "Do you understand as well?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice rough. The judge nodded once, like she'd stamped the decision. "Order entered," she said, and that was it. No dramatic music. No cinematic monologue. Just the sound of a pen and a judge who had heard enough. Outside the courtroom, Rachel tried to regain control. She turned toward me with a face that was halfway fury, halfway damage control. "This isn't over," she said through clenched teeth. Miss Patel stepped slightly in front of me, not aggressively, just enough to create a boundary. "It's not about over," she said calmly. "It's about compliance." Rachel's lawyer pulled her arm gently, murmuring something in her ear. Rachel jerked away and stormed down the hallway, heels clicking like punctuation. I stood there for a moment, my binder heavy in my hands, and I realized my shoulders hurt from being tense for months. I exhaled, slowly, and it felt like my lungs finally had room. The win wasn't revenge. The win was my kids getting peace and the truth on record. The first weekend after the court order felt strange. I picked the kids up at the exact time, stated. Rachel was on her best behavior, smiling too brightly, handing over their bags like she was proving something to an invisible audience. My son climbed into my car quietly. My daughter climbed in and immediately asked if Sir Sparkles could come to counseling too. I think Sir Sparkles might need his own therapist, I joked, and she laughed, loud and free, like she'd been holding it in. My son didn't laugh, but he looked out the window and then back at me. Are you mad at Mom? He asked. The question was careful, loaded. I kept my eyes on the road. I'm not going to talk badly about your mom, I said. I'm mad about some choices, but I love you, and I'm here. He nodded slowly, like he was testing the weight of my words. That weekend, I didn't try to force anything. I kept routines. Pancakes. Park time. Homework at the kitchen table. A movie night where my daughter insisted we watch the same animated film she'd seen 100 times, and my son pretended to hate it while quoting half the lines. On Sunday night, when I tucked them in, my son hesitated at his bedroom door. Dad? He said. Yeah? I answered. He swallowed. Mom said, if I liked being here, it meant I didn't love her. The words hit, but I didn't let my face change into anger. I sat on the edge of his bed, the cheap frame squeaking under my weight. Loving me doesn't take love away from Mom, I said. Love isn't like a pie where there's only so many slices. You can love both of us. You're allowed. My son stared at his blanket. Okay, he whispered. My daughter, half asleep in the next room, called out, Dad, I love everybody. Even my teacher. Even Sir Sparkles. My son rolled his eyes, but it was softer now, less guarded. Over the next weeks, counseling started. The therapist didn't treat my kids like broken things. She treated them like kids who were carrying adult stress. She gave them language for feelings they didn't know how to name. She gave them permission to be kids again. Rachel didn't magically become kind. She didn't apologize. But she followed the rules more often, because now the rules had teeth. The parenting app was a game changer. Every message was time-stamped. Every schedule change had to be written. It stripped away Rachel's ability to twist a phone call into a story. She still tried sometimes. She'd send messages like, the kids seem anxious after your weekends. And I'd respond with, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm following the schedule. Please share any specific concerns from the counselor in writing. I kept it boring. I kept it calm. I kept it documented. Months passed. My son started warming up again. It was subtle at first. He'd tell me small things about school. He'd ask me to help him build a model airplane, the kind that comes with stickers and tiny pieces that get lost instantly. One night, he laughed so hard at a joke my daughter made that milk came out of his nose, and he looked horrified for a second before we all cracked up. Dad, he said, wiping his face, mortified. This is the worst day of my life. My daughter pointed at him dramatically. Milk, nose, milk, nose forever. Even I laughed until my stomach hurt, and for the first time in a long time, the laughter didn't feel fragile. Then, one evening in late summer, I was washing dishes while the kids played in the living room. The sun was low, throwing orange light across the countertop. My hands smelled like dish soap and spaghetti sauce. My son walked into the kitchen and stood quietly beside me. I turned off the water. What's up? I asked. He looked at the floor. I think Mom says stuff, he admitted. I stayed still. I didn't rush him. I didn't pounce on the opening like it was a victory. He continued, voice small. I think she wanted me to be mad at you. My throat tightened. How do you feel? I asked. He shrugged, but his eyes looked wet. I don't know. I'm sorry. I set the sponge down and crouched so I was at his level. You don't need to be sorry, I told him. You're a kid. This isn't your job. He stepped forward suddenly and hugged me, quick and fierce, like he was afraid it would disappear if he waited. My daughter ran in 2 seconds later, jealous on principle. Hug pile, she yelled, launching herself into us. I almost fell backward, laughing, arms full of my kids, my heart full of something that felt like relief and grief braided together. The revenge, if it can be called that, wasn't me plotting some illegal destruction. It wasn't me humiliating Rachel on social media. It wasn't me trying to ruin her life. It was the simplest kind of karma. Rachel tried to weaponize my kids with whispers and threats. And in the end, her own words were what the court heard. Her own messages. Her own voice. The mask slipped because it was recorded in black and white and audio files. Time-stamped and undeniable. And the outcome wasn't that she lost everything. The outcome was that she lost the ability to control everything. My parenting time became protected. Communication became monitored. The kids got support. The judge made it clear that manipulation wouldn't be tolerated, and Rachel's future choices would carry consequences if she didn't comply. I didn't win against her. I protected my kids. Now, life is steadier. Not perfect. Co-parenting is still complicated. There are still tense moments. But my kids don't look at me like a stranger anymore. My son tells me about his friends again. My daughter asks me to braid her hair before school, even though I'm still terrible at it, and she always announces, "Dad, this braid is kind of weird." Like she's doing a consumer review. Some nights, after they fall asleep at my place, I sit in the quiet and think about how close I came to reacting the way Rachel wanted. How close I came to giving her the outburst she could point to and say, "See? See what I deal with?" I'm glad I didn't. If someone threatens to turn my kids against me, I don't explode, I document. I stay calm. I let the evidence speak where emotions can't. I keep communication in writing. I save everything and organize it by date. I refuse to drag my kids into adult conflict. I show up consistently, because courts notice patterns and kids feel them. I share this because I know how isolating it feels when someone tries to rewrite your relationship with your own children. I read the comments when people share pieces of their lives, and I take them seriously. I'm going to keep telling these real-life karma stories, because sometimes the only thing that keeps a person steady is knowing somebody else made it through the same storm. And if this story hit close to home, I'm here, still standing, still showing up, still building a life where my kids can breathe again.